Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes. What becomes of a man forged in the fires of addiction and prison? Now a titan of country music. When he is placed in the arena opposite a host who wields judgment as her sharpest weapon, you are about to bear witness to a confrontation so volatile. It would scar the annals of daytime television forever. And so the protagonist, Jelly Roll, a colossus of ink and redemption, walked onto the set of The View, believing it to be a platform for his story, a testament to his odyssey from the gutter to the stars. But fate had cast a different scene. He found himself face-to-face with the antagonist Joy Behar, who had prepared an arsenal not of questions, but of accusations ready to dismantle him. Piece by agonizing piece. This was no mere interview. This was a tragedy in the making. A study in the hubris that prods a patient man toward war. Before the curtain rises on this drama, subscribe to this chronicle and lend your voice to the chorus below for when the final act concludes. You will have much to declare. The air on that Tuesday morning was thick with anticipation. The studio lights burning with the intensity of a midday sun as Jelly Roll, adjusting his black button-down shirt, settled into the fabled chair. The audience was a sea of excitement. Many were his faithful, those who had tracked his staggering ascent from a troubled past to chart-dominating success. Whoopi Goldberg had just concluded her opening, and a current of pure positive energy coursed through the room. It was a deceptive calm. The man behind the myth, Jason DeFord, had awaited this televised clash for weeks. It was to be his arena, a platform to speak of his new album, to wage his public crusade for justice reform, and to extend a lifeline to the souls still wrestling with the very demons he had long since vanquished. Our next guest has had quite the journey. Whoopi began, her voice a warm prelude to the storm. From spending time behind bars to topping the country charts. Please welcome Jelly Roll. The audience erupted, a wave of sound crashing as he waved. A genuine smile illuminated his face. A beacon of the raw charisma that drew people to him. An authenticity that could never be manufactured. Thank you so much for having me, Jelly Roll said. His deep voice, a Southern River familiar to his millions of fans, filled the space. I've been watching this show for years, so this is pretty surreal for me. The opening volley of questions came from Sarah Haynes' light and easy probes into his music. She asked of his collaborations with other artists, of the tour that lay ahead, and he answered every query with the profound humility and gratitude that had become his trademark, the very qualities that had built his kingdom of fans. He spoke of how music became his salvation. He spoke of how his daughter became his reason. He spoke of how his platform could become a lifeline for others. He said, his large frame leaning forward, commanding the space. I think a lot of people look at someone like me and they write me off before they even get to know my story, the tattoos, the past, all of that. But I want people to understand that we all have the capacity to change, to grow, to become better than we were. The studio held its breath, captivated. This was the Jelly Roll. They revered the confessor, the survivor, the man unafraid of his own scars. Then Alyssa Farah Griffin guided the conversation toward his work in criminal justice reform. A fire ignited in his eyes as he described the programs he championed, designed to shepherd the formerly incarcerated back into the world. I've been where these guys are, he explained, his voice rising with the conviction of a true believer. I know what it's like to feel like society has given up on you, like you're never going to be anything more than your worst mistake. But that's not true. People can change. They just need someone to believe in them and give them a real chance. And it was then in that moment of profound sincerity that Joy Behar, who had been lying in wait, a predator smirk playing on her lips, chose to spring her ambush. Her eyes held a familiar glinting malice. A look well known to the show's faithful. It was the look that promised chaos for the sake of chaos. Well, that's all. Very nice and inspirational. Joy began, her voice a cascade of pure condescension. But let's be real here. You spent years breaking the law. You were involved with drugs. You were in and out of prison. Now you're sitting here talking about second chances like you're some kind of expert on rehabilitation. A dead silence descended upon the studio. The air crackled, the positive energy of moments before instantly curdling as her words poisoned the atmosphere. Jelly Roll's smile faltered, but his composure held firm. A fortress taking the first cannonball. I think my experience gives me a unique perspective. He replied calmly. I'm not claiming to be an expert on anything except my own journey. But if sharing my story can help even one person avoid the mistakes I made, then it's worth it. Joy's thirst for conflict, however, was not yet slaked. She leaned back, a smug, self-satisfied victor, as if she had just delivered a master stroke. But don't you think it's a little convenient that now that you're famous and making money, suddenly you're this reformed character? I mean, how do we know this isn't just good PR? The camera, an unblinking eye, captured the subtle betrayal, the tightening of his jaw, the fleeting clench of his fists, a warrior forcing his hands from his sword. The other host shifted, their discomfort palpable. Unwitting spectators in a battle they had not foreseen. Joy, he said, and the single word was not a name, but a warning. A low rumble of thunder before the lightning strike. I think you're misunderstanding what this is about. This isn't PR. This is my life. These aren't talking points. These are real experiences that shaped who I am. But his opponent was just beginning to deploy her heaviest artillery. That predatory gleam intensified in her eyes. She had drawn blood and was now moving in for the kill. I'm just saying it's easy to talk about redemption and second chances when you're sitting pretty with a record deal and sold-out concerts. What about the people you hurt along the way? What about the communities that were damaged by the drug trade you were part of? The accusation landed hanging in the studio air like a shroud. And with those words, the transformation was complete. The composed guest was gone. His breath deepened. His posture shifted from repose to readiness. A fire long banked now raged in his eyes, signaling to all that a fatal line had just been crossed. You want to talk about the people I hurt? Jelly Roll's voice was no longer calm. It was a rising tide of righteous fury. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about how I've spent every day since I got clean. Trying to make amends, trying to do better, trying to use whatever platform I have to help people. And yet Joy, whether through sheer ignorance of the tempest she had unleashed or from a place of pure malice, pressed her assault. But that doesn't undo the damage, does it? But that cannot summon back the lives lost to the abyss, nor mend the families shattered by it. One cannot simply sing away such a heavy mantle of responsibility. And that was the trigger. That was the precise moment the dam of a man's soul gave way. The moment the carefully constructed fortress of his composure maintained for years finally crumbled under the relentless siege of Joy's words. This man who had spent years of his life learning to master his own fury, who had spent years of his life toiling to become a better man, was suddenly confronted by a force seemingly intent on razing everything he had built to the ground. The explosion is instantaneous. Volcanic Jelly Roll is on his feet. A surge of motion so violent his chair is sent skittering backward. His 6-foot frame, a monolith of rage looming over the desk. His voice detonates across the studio, a shock wave that makes every soul in the room flinch. Are you kidding me right now? He roars, the southern cadence of his voice thickening with the raw tide of his emotion. You think I don't carry that weight every single day? Do you believe for a second I don't know exactly what I've done and who I've hurt? Lady, you possess absolutely no concept of what you are speaking of. The studio audience lets out a single bay unified gasp. Camera operators scramble, desperate to capture every angle of the unfolding warfare, while producers in the control room frantically debate the signal for retreat to a commercial break. Whoopi sits stunned. Sarah's hand flies to her mouth in shock. Alyssa is a statue in her chair. But Joy incredibly seems almost triumphant, as if she has successfully goat the beast from its cage, achieving the very reaction she had engineered. There it is, she says, a smug smile playing on her lips, gesturing to Jelly Roll as if he were Exhibit A. There is the man you truly are, she declares. Beneath all this talk of redemption, still the same angry criminal, merely clad in better garments. If the studio had been tense before, it is now a tomb. The only sound is the ragged cadence of Jelly Roll's breathing as he glares down at Joy. His expression a maelstrom of fury, of disbelief, and of something far more primal. When he speaks again, his voice has dropped to a low, menacing growl, a sound somehow more terrifying than his earlier roar had been. You want to see the real me? He asks, leaning forward, his hands planted on the desk like anchors in a storm. The real me spent 3 years in a county jail cell, contemplating every single person I wounded, every family I fractured, every life I helped to ruin. The real me is haunted by nightmares of young people who overdosed on the poison I peddled. The real me attends the funerals of those I grew up with, the ones who did not escape as I did. Joy attempts an interruption, a futile counterattack, but Jelly Roll's voice slices through her words like a blade. No, you initiated this conflict, so we shall see it through. You sit there upon your ivory tower, casting judgment down upon men like me. But what have you ever sacrificed? What great struggle have you ever overcome? Can it be you think redemption is nothing more than a marketing ploy? Because you have never been in desperate need of it yourself. The camera tightens on Joy's face, and for the first time since the battle was joined, she appears genuinely unsettled. The smug mask begins to crack at the edges. The dawning horror that she has perhaps provoked a war she cannot win. I am merely asking the difficult questions that must be asked. She parries, but her voice is a pale echo of the confidence it held mere moments ago. Someone must hold people accountable. Accountable Jelly Roll laughs. A sound utterly devoid of humor. You think this is you holding me accountable? I hold myself accountable with every breath I take. I collaborate with organizations that guide the addicted back to the light. I walk into prisons to speak to young men who are making the very same mistakes I made. I give funds to families who have lost their own to the plague of addiction. What precisely are you doing to better the world? Aside from sitting in this chair and attempting to tear people down, Whoopi at last finds her voice trying to referee the bout. But Jelly Roll is not finished. His focus is a laser beam fixed on Joy. Do you know the difference between us? I admit my wrongs. I own my failures. You sit here day after day finding a moral high ground over all others. But you are nothing more than a bully armed with a microphone. A flush of crimson rises on Joy's face. A tide of anger, not shame. How dare you call me a bully? I am a journalist asking legitimate questions about what Jelly Roll's voice cuts her off. Rising once more to a roar about the impossibility of a man who has erred ever truly changing about how anyone with a past like mine should be silenced and erased. You are not asking questions. You are advancing an agenda, and that agenda is to make others feel diminished, so that you might feel elevated. The other host looked between the two combatants. Spectators at a gladiatorial contest, uncertain whether to intervene or to let fate run its course. The audience holds its breath. A silent chorus transfixed by the raw, unscripted tragedy unfolding before them. I have interviewed thousands of people. Joy fires back, her own volume rising in a desperate defense. I know how to distinguish genuine rehabilitation from a well-rehearsed narrative. And what I see before me is someone who has mastered the art of saying the right words to make us all forget what he truly is. That last volley strikes Jelly Roll like a physical blow. His face is a canvas of shifting emotions: hurt, then anger, then a profound look that borders on pity. When he speaks again, his voice is quiet, yet it carries more force than all his shouting. What I truly am, he says, his words slow, deliberate, is a father who desperately wants his daughter to be proud of the man he has become. What I truly am is a soul who has known the deepest abyss and claws his way out of it every single day. What I truly am is a human being who made catastrophic choices and is now dedicating the remainder of his days to atoning for them. He pauses, letting the weight of his testimony settle in the silent air. But what times our Joy is someone who is paid to diminish people on national television. Someone who mistakes cruelty for intellect. Someone who has never had to fight for anything of substance in her entire life. And so you cannot possibly comprehend what real change even looks like. Joy opens her mouth to retort, but Jelly Roll raises a hand, a gesture of absolute authority that silences her. I am not finished. You want to speak of accountability? Let us speak of your own. How many people have you discouraged from seeking help, making them believe society will never forgive them? How many second chances have you annihilated with your brand of cynicism? How many families have you helped keep broken by peddling the lie that people are incapable of fundamental change? The questions hang in the air, each one an indictment. Joy's face is a portrait of defeat, revealing that every arrow has found its mark. The confident interrogator, the smug antagonist, has been rendered utterly speechless. And in that moment, the mask of the relentless prosecutor slipped, revealing a flicker of dawning horror. The realization she had cornered not a fox, but a bear. You believe you're so clever. Jelly Roll's voice shifted. The fire of anger banked into the smoldering embers of disappointment. You believe you're unmasking some grand deception. But the only thing you're exposing is the hollowness of your own character. A person who prefers the wrecking ball to the trowel. From the sidelines, Sarah Haynes attempted a diplomatic intervention, a peacekeeper venturing into no man's land. But the combatants were deaf to her plea. The studio had transformed. This was no longer a mere television interview. It was a coliseum for a war of ideologies, a battle of two faiths, a clash between cynicism and the possibility of redemption. I stand by every word. Joy countered, but the weapon of her voice now trembled in her hand. People have a right to be skeptical of convenient transformations. At this, Jelly Roll shook his head, a slow, mournful motion, and his eyes when they met hers held not victory but a deep, sorrowful pity. Do you see the true tragedy here? You were given a stage to discuss addiction, to explore real solutions, to debate criminal justice reform, to question how we mend broken lives. Instead, you chose cruelty as your sport. You chose mockery as your spectacle. A dead silence fell. The weight of his accusation descended upon the studio. A suffocating shroud for a single fleeting beat. A crack appeared in her armor. A hint of contemplation. But the moment passed. Her defenses slammed shut, and she straightened in her chair. A queen reasserting her crumbling reign. Do not lecture me about entertainment. She shot back, her voice brittle. This is journalism. We ask the hard questions. We confront the uncomfortable truths. If you cannot withstand the heat, perhaps you should flee the arena. The laugh that escaped Jelly Roll was not of mirth, but of ice and ash. Hard questions, he echoed, the words dripping with scorn. Is that your name for this ambush? Allow me to deploy my own arsenal. When was the last time you admitted a failing? When was the last time you offered compassion to the fallen? When was the last time you used this throne of yours not to judge, but to heal? The barrage landed. Joy's mouth worked, opening and closing, but her ammunition was spent. No sound emerged. The Inquisitor had become the subject of the Inquisition, a stunning reversal of fortune. She floundered, searching for solid ground on a battlefield that had shifted beneath her feet, just as I suspected. Jelly Roll pressed on, his voice a rising tide. You can wield the sword, but you cannot bear a shield. You can lay siege to another's fortress for days, but when your own walls are questioned, you cry foul once more. Whoopee. The voice of reason attempted to call a truce. Okay, I believe we need to. No. The word from Jelly Roll was granite. He turned, addressing Whoopee, not with disrespect, but with unyielding resolve. I appreciate your aim, but this must be heard. I came to this table in good faith to speak of music, of redemption, of hope. Instead, I was led into a prepared ambush. The verdict on my character decided before the trial even began. He pivoted back to Joy. The target, his volume dropped, but the intensity coiled, becoming dangerously sharp. Do you know the greatest sadness in this room? It is the opportunity you squandered. You could have asked about the programs I champion, the children I mentor, the genuine work being done to salvage lives from the wreckage. Instead, you chose to be a tormentor. I am not a tormentor. Joy protested, her voice thin. For what? Jelly Roll's voice detonated, his composure finally fracturing into 1,000 pieces. For getting clean. For rebuilding a shattered life. For trying to steer others from the very cliffs I fell from. What is my crime in this court of yours? What am I accountable for besides a past? That offends your sensibilities? The air in the studio crackled thick with unspoken voltage. The cameras, like roving eyes of fate, panned across a stunned audience, capturing faces frozen in shock. Hands clasped over mouths. In the control room, the gods of broadcast watched the spectacle unfold. Producers frantically debated. Was this a catastrophe spiraling out of control or the most magnetic television ever recorded? You're accountable. Joy fired back, finding a last round of ammunition for profiting from a tale of redemption while your victims still suffer. The words found their mark. Profiting. The question broke from Jelly Roll's lips fractured with pure emotion. You think this is profit? Every single dollar, every stage I stand on is a debt I know I must repay every single day. Do you think I am ignorant of the family shattered by the poison I once peddled? Do you imagine a record deal grants me peaceful slumber? He surged forward again, leaning across the desk, closing the distance. His face was mere inches from hers, and his voice was a testament to raw, unvarnished pain. I give away more money to recovery charities than most will see in a decade. I walk the halls of prisons speaking to boys with my own ghost in their eyes. I use this platform, this microphone, this second chance to preach that change is possible through relentless work from across the chasm. Joy attempted to launch another volley to interrupt the sermon. But the sheer force of his conviction washed over her words, silencing them completely. But that is not the story you wish to tell, is it? It does not fit the villain you have cast. You decided my role in this play long ago, and no mountain of evidence will sway your verdict. Evidence? Joy scoffed. A final desperate sneer. What evidence? A few charitable checks, a handful of prison tours. Do you believe that erases everything you did? The question struck the room like a bolt of lightning. Slowly, Jelly Roll pulled back, straightening to his full height, and the look in his eyes had transformed. The fire was gone, replaced by the deep, still waters of acceptance. "No," he answered, his voice a quiet echo in the silent room. "Nothing can ever erase what I did. Nothing can return the lives lost to my choices. Nothing can mend the families I helped shatter. Nothing can rebuild the communities I helped poison." And that, he affirmed, his voice gaining a new profound strength, is a burden I carry every single day. This was not the roar of a wounded animal. This was the resonant toll of a bell from a place of deep clarity. But your true question, the one beneath it all, is whether or not I am worthy of forgiveness. Whether I deserve redemption. Whether a man with my past should be permitted to walk forward and attempt to atone. His gaze swept the room, a silent appeal to the hosts, to the audience, to the unblinking eyes of the cameras themselves, and to that I have only one answer. I do not know if I deserve it. That judgment does not belong to me. But I do know this. I will spend every remaining day of my life trying to be worthy of it. Joy's mouth opened, a final reflexive gesture of a defeated foe. But Jelly Roll raises his hand once more. A gesture that silences the battlefield. You wish to pass judgment, so be it. Judge me by my actions from this day forward. Judge me by the lives I endeavor to save. By the youth I steer from the ruinous path I once walked, by the families I help make whole. Do not judge me for the man I was. Judge me for the man I am becoming. The silence that crashes down in the wake of his words is absolute. The studio holds its breath. Even Joy appears stunned into submission, disarmed by the raw, unshielded honesty of his counterattack. The camera and unforgiving eye captures her expression for a fleeting instant. A flicker of what could only be shame. You came into this arena today. Jelly Roll continues, his voice a pillar of strength, believing you would unmask a charlatan. But the only thing you have exposed is your own profound inability to conceive that a person can change. Your own bitter cynicism, your own desperate need to pull others down to feel the illusion of height. He adjusts his shirt, a small gesture of composure, and locks his gaze directly with the camera's lens. For anyone watching, for anyone locked in a struggle, for anyone who has made mistakes they believe are unforgivable, for anyone told by people like her that they are forever defined by their darkest hour. I need you to hear this. You can change. The path is not easy and victory is not won overnight. But you can change. Let no one persuade you otherwise. Joy launches one last desperate volley to reclaim lost ground. I believe you are being excessively dramatic. Jelly Roll cuts her off. A final decisive blow. You launched an ambush on my character, my motives, my redemption, and my very right to speak of my own life. You attempted to dismantle me on national television for nothing more than your own grim entertainment. And when I mounted a defense, when I demonstrated what true accountability is. You call me dramatic, he shakes his head, the disgust undisguised. Do you know what program, Joy? You are precisely the kind of person who makes seeking help a harder war to wage. You are precisely the kind of person who keeps families fractured and communities broken. You are the problem here, not I. With that, he turns from her, a complete dismissal, and addresses Whoopi directly. Thank you for inviting me to your show. I regret that it devolved into this conflict, but I will not apologize for defending myself from an attack armed with nothing but malice and prejudice. The camera captures Joy's face a final time as Jelly Roll prepares his exit. She wears the look of someone who has just grasped the catastrophic nature of their miscalculation. Someone just beginning to comprehend. They have stormed a fortress that should never have been besieged. Wait, she calls out, her voice then as he begins to walk away, but Jelly Roll does not grant her a backward glance. Our business is concluded. He states over his shoulder, his tone ringing with the finality of a verdict. I came here to speak of redemption and hope, and you twisted it into an assault. The fault for that is yours, not mine. As he exits the stage, the air crackles with a stunned silence. The other hosts seem frozen, their expressions a tableau of shock as they try to process the detonation they just witnessed. And Joyce sits isolated at the desk, appearing diminished, smaller than she was when the engagement began. She is the very picture of a general who has just learned a brutal lesson on the power of words and the peril of pushing a good man to his breaking point. What began as a standard interview had erupted into something far more significant. A tragic clash between two opposing philosophies on human nature, on forgiveness, on the very possibility of redemption itself. And in the end, it was undeniable to every soul in that studio who had emerged the victor. So, What is your verdict on this incredible confrontation? Do you believe that people truly deserve a second chance? Was Joy's skepticism justified, or was it a fatal flaw? Leave your intelligence report in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more chronicles that will utterly shatter your perceptions.